You're listening to Eyes on the Ground. I'm Slade Ham, comedian, writer, explorer. I'll be your host. In 2016, I had the privilege to join the cast of the third film in Jordan Brady's I Am Comic documentary series. Jordan is a commercial director now, and he's a seasoned documentarian, but he's also directed Hollywood features, hosted MTV game shows, and in a lesser-known piece of trivia, is the inventor of the phrase "bow chicka bow wow," which was a signature piece in a very successful stand-up comedy career. The film I'm in, I Am Battle Comic, which Jordan admits has a somewhat misleading name, looks at what it's like to perform stand-up comedy for the United States military overseas. It touts a star-studded cast of comedians, much like the previous two films in the series, I Am Road Comic, and the cult classic that started it all, I Am Comic. I Am Comic features interviews with Phyllis Diller, Jeff Foxworthy, Louis Black, Kathy Griffin, Tim Allen, as well as a host of known and unknown names at the time. And I cannot recommend it more as the perfect primer for anyone interested in stand-up comedy beyond what you see in a Netflix special. More importantly, Jordan and I have become friends, and his optimistic approach to the world of entertainment is infectious. I turn to him frequently with questions about filmmaking, and he's gracious enough to never say no. I sat down with him to find out the story behind his documentaries and how he goes about making things. We begin with a brief look at who he is now as a commercial director. I asked him for an example of a commercial he'd directed that accurately demonstrated his comedic style. This is Jordan Brady.
It is my defining voice of comedy in a commercial.
I'm pumping with confidence.
I'm pumping with confidence too.
My pumping didn't used to be this confident. Then I switched to Arco.
Why do I pump with confidence?
Because Arco gas has a special additive that helps clean and protect my engine's critical parts.
He's pumping with confidence.
Pumping.
Confidence.
Pumping with confidence.
With any grade of Arco gas.
Are you pumping with confidence?
Take your confidence to the next level. Switch to Arco high-quality gas.
How did you convince them?
The ad agencies write the ads.
Okay.
I did not write that, right? It was some very wonderful people, and I'm afraid to give them credit because I don't know how much of the story I tell it may hurt them. But it was how did they and I get that client? Because the client at the time, and I hope they're not watching, they didn't quite get it. They thought it was an anthem about gasoline. They were watching the same monitor. Uh-huh. I did tell the actors, like, look, if I say earnest, that means play it a little heavy-handed. Like, we did have a code.
Right, of course. But the company was just, I don't want to say oblivious, just...
In the meeting before we shot, the pre-production meeting, they were like, look, we don't want this to be like a...
That's not innuendo. That's pretty overt. You guys didn't slip one.
Where the hose? The guy's holding the hose like his team.
The woman. Jordan.
He's pumping with confidence.
Tell me the process of this. You're the director of the spot. The ad agency has written the spot. They've chosen you as the director, or what is the process? Because when you come in, you get to decide how all of this goes down, right?
Right. So typically the ad agencies will write the spot and they sell the spot based on an ideology, a messaging that they want the client to follow, and the client signs off on it. Then they hire a director, and it's usually 3 directors, women and men that are tonally aligned with what they want to have executed. And once you win the job, then you're off and running, and you're I wouldn't say left alone, right? It's not an auteur's world as a commercial director. You're
right. There's oversight.
Gun for hire, yeah. And there's oversight, and you're checking in. But the tone, they really let you run with the subtleties and the tone and the performance and the stage. You're making a 30-second film.
Right.
And they're the studio, I guess. And so it was part of it's the behind the scenes, just making everyone comfortable how great it's going to be, knowing how funny it is in your head.
I can't imagine knowing that that's the spot you're shooting, and no one else really being able to grasp that yet.
I mean, the agency guys were cracking up the whole time.
Naturally, they
muffling their laughter,
because this is a huge win for them. Having
and it's been so many years that I guess and everybody's gone on to different jobs and everything, but like even afterwards, I put it on Funny or Die. And like 2 months later, because there were articles that said like somebody's either going to win awards or get fired.
It plays like a SNL spot.
Right. But it's still an ad. So that was the fine line. That's why I sent it. Like if I had to, if Tombstones had a little iPad on them, I would put, this would be one of the spots. This would be one of the top 10.
Would you make the argument that a spot, like I guess you would, that commercials really aren't there to sell you anything. They're there to get you to remember one thing, and that's the brand, to have it in your head. Like with that, your takeaway may not be that the gas is amazing. Your takeaway may be Arco. That's just what's in your head after. Oh my God, did you see that Arco commercial?
Sure.
And now maybe because of Bader Meinhof or whatever, you start to notice okay, there's an Arco gas. I'll stop by there because pumping or whatever.
Well, yes, some spots, it's not exclusive either here. Like some spots like Nike, you never see a price of a Nike shoe, or it's never a sale. So it's a brand message, right? But other spots, like I did Popeye's Chicken for 3 or 4 years. I'll never forget that the chief marketing officer would say, like, it'd be a bunch of comedy for 22 seconds. And then it would be the deal, right? Where you'd show the chicken for $5.95 and beautiful chicken shots. And then we usually end with a little button of comedy. And we would be shooting and he would come over and go, hey man, I don't know nothing about comedy. I'm not going to tell you, Jordan, how to do your comedy, but it's time to get to the pieces and prices. And the pieces and prices, I use that all the time. Like, that's what's going to sell them. Like, the comedy's funny, but what really drives the traffic to our stores?
Pieces and prices.
Pieces and prices.
Now, commercials are certainly one thing, but much like feature films, you're working with someone else's script. Documentaries are fascinating to me because of the unscripted nature. As an on-camera participant, even I don't know what the official story is. I asked Jordan how much of I Am Comic, the original, was in his head when he began filming. But first, we got distracted by his minimalist approach that I witnessed firsthand as we traveled through Kuwait, Bahrain, and Afghanistan.
My son, Ben Brady, shot me in the living room packing. Mm-hmm. And then there's stock footage and clips from, YouTube. Don Barnhart brought a camera to put in the middle of the room for performances. So he gave me that footage. That was helpful. Jeff Capri gave me a hard drive with some, like him in a helicopter flying over Iraq, with machine gunners hanging out the window. And other than that, I mean, I shot 92.4% of the movie out of a backpack.
Yeah.
Which was a chore. And like going into, some Bahrainian Air Force base where I had to hide all the camera. The only thing I did is I kept the little memory cards in my pocket. I never backed anything up. For the filmmakers out there, and the common man, you back up your footage every night. But I didn't want to take a laptop and a computer and a hard drive. So I had this little waterproof case, and I would fill a card, lock it, and put it in there. And I had that on my person at all times because that was the investment.
It was everything, and there were no retakes. Once we left the country, we were not. There's no going back to Afghanistan for pickup shots.
Right. But let me jump back to your initial question about I Am Comic. So this is kind of interesting. I think I was in Montevideo, Uruguay, doing a commercial for Danonino yogurt with children who only spoke Spanish and I who barely butcher Spanish. Mm-hmm. But I'm directing this global commercial, right? So we were shooting in Uruguay. It was really cheap. And the young advertising creatives, the art director and the copywriter and the producer, YouTube had just been invented. It was just becoming popular. So this is like 2006 or something, right? And they said, "Oh my God." Because, they're at this under a tent with monitors, and in between setups, they're just Googling and doing stuff. So they go, "Oh my God, we just found your stand-up on YouTube." So it's me in this lime green suit from Comedy Central's The A-List.
Was that your style?
I don't call it a mullet. I call it a soccer cut. And I'm thin and I'm pretty and I'm doing the bow chicka wow wow bit. And people had been saying, like, what's that like? What was that like being a comedian? And I would tell the story. And that moment that they found that clip, I was like, fuck it. I got to make a documentary about this. Now, I hadn't made a movie. I did some poorly received features in the late 90s, early 2000s.
You directed Waking Up in Reno.
Waking Up in Reno, which I called Waking Up on Showtime, was a critical flop. And
Billy Bob Thornton and Charlize Theron were in that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Charlize was very, very cool. And Billy Bob Thornton was in the movie. And the late, great Patrick Swayze was super cool. We became friends. We actually did a short film together after that. And Natasha Richardson, who is an amazing, beautiful person who passed away as well, we were very friendly. So it took me really till 2009 to go, okay, I'm going to start interviewing comedians. And I started research a year before. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to Rich Scheidner, who, for those of you who've seen the movie, you know the story. If you don't, Rich Scheidner is one of the best stand-up comics. Like he was what Tim Allen did. Rich went through with a machete and paved the way for that kind of Foxworthy. The married guy, well-honed, would do an hour and a half on stage. He was both a road warrior and the guy that had the HBO specials. And he's a great human being.
All of the above.
And I worked with him in Greensboro at the Comedy Zone.
Of course.
Yeah, he didn't remember, but I reached out, and he had a book called I Killed.
Yes, that's right? Scheidner. Yes.
And I think he wrote it with Mark Schiff, another great comedian. And I was like, well, I'll just get the rights to the book. I'll tell the stories of the book. That'll be the documentary.
Spoiler alert. That is not what the film ended up being. This is why I was so curious. One of my biggest problems used to be the inability to begin a project until I was 100% ready. What I've learned is that we're rarely going to end up with the thing we first envisioned anyway. Like Rube Goldberg machines, there will inevitably be pinch points and things we have to work around or adjust or scrap altogether that we simply cannot account for before we begin. Because really, we don't know what something actually is until we're right in the middle of it.
Your question was like, did it become something different? Like, I think all good documentaries come out a little different than you, right? So I was just going to do road stories and I was going to break down like headliner, middle act, what is a callback, this and that. Like, I remember one of the funniest interviews, I was interviewing Eliza Schlesinger, who is a big star now.
Huge now.
Right? And I remember saying, like, acting real dumb, and she doesn't know that I've done stand-up. I'm just some guy at the Laugh Factory with a camera and a little light. And I'm like, what's a callback? And she goes, a callback is when you refer back. Like, she's explaining it as if I'm some
like you're an actual idiot. Yes.
And one of my documentary techniques is to repeat the question so that the camera woman, my friend Jean, would reposition the lens, and now we have two takes, right? Like, she'll zoom in to get the close-up while I'm re-asking. So I would go, that's one of my little tips.
Yes.
I would go, so wait a minute, a callback what is a callback? And in the dailies of in the raw footage, you can see her so patient with me, Eliza, like, a callback.
This idiot's making a film.
Yeah. And I wish I'm so proud. Like Nikki Glazer, my wife Jeanette and I found her in, not like she was a lost bird, but we discovered her in
like a
Portland.
Wounded butterfly.
Yeah. And this raw talent and just such a great personality. And 25 or whatever she was. And we followed her in the cab. We gave her a ride to a show. We interviewed her. And then So long way of saying, my initial device were road stories, the mechanics of stand-up, and build a comic. That was my big idea. Mm-hmm. I knew that in New York, you really wanted to be a comedian. And in LA, you wanted to be a comedian to get on a television show.
Correct. Two totally different reasons to go to those cities.
So this was my third act. That in the first act, I would have a contest. Well, the first act, I would establish rules. In the second act, I would establish a contest in LA where we would have reasonable comics, not open micers.
Right, but functional, comics. Yes.
And they would compete. And Andy Kindler was going to be a judge. I was reaching out to Kathy Griffin if she would be a judge. And the Laugh Factory said yes. JB Masada, like, very supportive. And then from the contest, we would pick someone, and I would put them up in a condo in New York for 2 weeks and get them gigs, which I had the Comedy Cellar, Stand Up New York, and Caroline's, and see if they could compete as a New York comedian.
Wow.
That's a great experiment.
That is a beautiful idea. That is what happened. How did that not end up being the film?
Because
that's brilliant.
Thank you. It could, maybe it's something we could resurrect. Like a little petri dish of comedy, right? 2 petri dishes. You pick one, you put it in the other. Well, I noticed the first time we interviewed all these comedians at the Improv on Melrose in California, Scheidner's doing the interviews, and Scheidner's helping write questions, and he knows these people. Sometimes, like, he's going on forever asking people all these questions. And then when we were done, he was out in the front and mingling with these guys, and I could just feel something was like, I mean, they all look up to this guy.
Of course.
And he's not in the game. He's been writing for 13 years.
Off stage entirely.
Writing for other comedians and his books, and he's a very smart guy.
When did you have the aha moment?
About 2 months later, because I would shoot commercials, specifically Kentucky Fried Chicken. I did like a year of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I would try to tell the agency, like, we should really shoot on Thursday so that Friday we could have
right.
help me out with the comedian. So we go to New York, and we're at the Comedy Cellar, and we interview, like, Attell was at the Comedy Cellar. Louis C.K. was, I think, during the day. This is pre-whack-off C.K.
Right. This is way before you knew him from that.
But he was still president of the Louis C.K. fan club at the time. A bunch of comedians at the Comedy Cellar. The wonderful Judy Gold. It's just so funny forever. And we go to the club that night, and the crew, my friend Jean Vienne, the DP, and a couple of people from the production, we have a table in the corner and we're watching shows. Mm-hmm. Now, you have to understand that in the early 2000s, the wonderfully, wickedly funny Dana Gould saw me in the audience when I brought some advertising people to his show. I said, you got to see my favorite comedian. I treated them to a night of comedy in LA. Came out and stared at me and he goes, "You're cured. You can sit in the audience and watch a comedy show? Jordan, you're cured." And he gave me a hug.
Good for you. Yeah, that is I'm incapable.
Right. I'd rather be in the back of the room going, ha.
But was it uncomfortable? Were you just, you sat there and you watched?
A little bit. But I enjoy stand-up. Like, we saw Brian Regan. I sat in the audience after we filmed him for I Am Comic.
I went and saw Chappelle on this last, the little 200-seat tour, or I guess I saw him with 120-something people, and it was just, I sat in the back row, but I just sat there with my God. I don't think I laughed out loud once. I don't know how to do that in a comedy club. But just
you're watching the tapestry that he's weaving,
yes,
and dissecting it from a different point of view.
Yeah. So I'm interrupting.
That I still do.
Your aha moment.
So the aha moment is, and Scheidner's told this story too, although he puts a little twist on it that I'm more devious than I really was. I look over and Scheidner's gone. Like the crowd is killing. The audience, comedians are killing. The crowd is going crazy. And I look over, Scheidner's gone. So after the show, I go and I find him in Washington Square Park. And I'm like, what the fuck? What? He's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I said, I know why. You got to do stand up. I can't do it. No. I said, no, you got to get back on stage. The documentary needs that. That's what this story is. Because, Rich you hear him asking the questions.
Right. He's the narrator, but he's
the narrator, which we kind of went back and retrofitted the intro. Like I shot the intro after all this happened.
So there you go. Permission to start something without knowing how you're going to finish it. Or, for that matter, what it's even supposed to be. Believe it or not, this works for everything from a simple brainstorming session to making a feature film. There's something about beginning something that makes it real. In fact, that's where this conversation is going. What is Jordan's secret to finishing something?
Well, countless people said to me after I directed my first feature called Dill Scallion. It's a country music spinal tap.
Dill Scallion.
Dill Scallion. You can't find it online, but I'll put it up soon. And I had the idea, and I remember a guy saying, well, once you print the script, this is back when you didn't have an inkjet printer, right? You had to go to a copy shop.
Oh, yeah.
And pay it was $70 to make 10 scripts at 110 pages each, and you would hand those scripts out.
Same cost at Kinko's still. They're very proud of their work.
The guy at the copy shop said, well, if you don't make the movie, you just wasted $72. And I was like, oh, I got to make the movie now because otherwise I got wasted $72. Really, the guy said that.
The Tao of Kinko's employees. How is this not a book?
Yeah. And so and so I was like, okay, we got to make the movie now. So with I Am Comic, it's like once I did a bunch of interviews, I was like, well, I got to figure this out. I got to keep going. Like to me, if you're going to start something, it's not a work of art, for lack of a better word. It's not a piece until it's done. So my mindset is once you know you want to do something, I look at the calendar and I pick a date and I write it in my calendar. And back then it was an old school little calendar that I would keep,
actually open it on your desk and turn to the page.
You pick a date and you write it down, and then you work towards that date. There's a marketer that I get his blog every morning, Seth Godin. Some people
you turned me onto him. Yes.
And he'll always say like you got to ship it, and other people have the same thing. Like you just got to put it out there. Like I pick the completion date, and I pick the start date. But more important is the start date. And I urge any creative person to use self-imposed timelines. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but I record my podcast Tuesdays at 11. And someone will go, because I hate when someone goes, hey, when do you want to do it? I don't know. What's good for you? I don't know. Throw out some dates. I hate that back and forth. I don't have time in my brain. So I'll go, I do it Tuesdays at 11.
In addition to everything else, Jordan also wrote a book called Commercial Directing Voodoo, which is a bit of a cheat sheet for directors of all varieties. And the concepts are so logical that with the swapping of a few nouns, you could probably repurpose it for your own industry as well. We finish our conversation with a few of the book's suggestions and some final thoughts on our emotional attachment to the things we make.
So a couple years ago, I put a book out, a filmmaking book, Commercial Directing Voodoo.
Got my
look
copy.
at that.
Yeah, it's right here. Well, this is Jordan. This thing has, I don't want to pat you on the back too much for it. You though, it's about commercial directing, but as a guy who's making short travelogues or anybody who's making films.
Content. Yeah, video content. You should read it.
The YouTuber, the anything, some of the things you talk about in here. And it's really frustrating because it points out how much you as filmmakers lie to us on a regular basis.
It's all lies.
And I
Am Comic has cutaways to different nights of performance to make it look like Scheidner's going crazy.
That's one of the things.
It was a different guy.
One of the things that's in here that you talk about reaction shots and things, and we when we're watching television, I say we, just the general public, when you're especially reality TV, it's so maddening when you've been on the behind the scenes of reality television and you watch the way something's presented, and then you watch people get emotionally involved in it, and you go, you're not reacting to a reality here. You're reacting to it's. I feel like it's exactly as scripted and produced, and the
as narrative
a real show. As bullshit as any other television show you could watch.
Amen. I bring up the book one because maybe someone will buy it for $10 on Amazon, Kindle, or Audible. You'll hear my sultry voice reading the book.
Worth every penny.
But I had a deadline, and I knew once I wanted to do it, I was like, fuck. And I get obsessed like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, building the volcano thing. Wasn't a volcano, whatever it was.
I haven't seen Close Encounters. Yeah.
Right. I thought I'd drop a relevant reference.
Perfect.
But my friend Merlin Camosi, I believe or was it Ben Yonker? One of my
both fantastic names.
Both guys came to my wildly popular boot camp, and one of them handed me the corrected version.
What?
Because the book is riddled. He highlighted.
Are there typos all throughout it?
There's typos. I mean, I think there's about, yes, they will. Yes, it will. For instead of FOUR, I put FOR. Like there's so many.
You and I both having made a book, I can tell you, I found one in mine flipping through, and nothing frustrates me more. I mean, we went through this thing with fine tooth combs, and I still missed one. You even did the artwork yourself, and I think that's it's just spectacular, Jordan.
That's a woman with a bong, by the way. But the point is, Slade, it's done. Someday when there's another pandemic, I'll go back and correct for volume 2, but I got to ship it because I was going over it. It wasn't quite a fine tooth comb. It was more of a ladle.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what it was. The same spoon shaped comb I went through mine with, because the reality was, as soon as I decided I was done, it was out there. It was going to the public. It was going out into the world. I was going to have to find something new to work on. I was going to have to, everything was all this obsession, this thing that I woke up every morning and half the time worked on, the other half tricked myself into believing I was working on so that I didn't have to do actual work. All the games we play. But there is something to typing the end, to being finished, to being, all right, cool. That's another thing I've done. On to the next one. And that is, do you have to detach from the personal element of it? Do you still have that emotional connection to the art, or do you just go, you know what, I'm done. On to the next thing. I'm a pro. This is what I do.
I don't think those are mutually exclusive.
Okay.
So I have a connection to all my creative children, but it's grown up. The book is the book. Like, I'll tweet about it every month.
Of course.
I service the projects, but it's like, I gotta move on.
Let me rephrase the question. It's your emotional well-being and your self-esteem is not attached to any one particular project.
Correct.
If something went out and failed, you would just move on to the next thing, as opposed to lying in your room and taking Xanax and drinking whiskey for a year.
Correct. And I have severe ADHD that I manage without drugs, and the projects help. So I may take a break in the middle of editing something and, just promote the hot sauce.
Oh, yeah. He has a hot sauce, too. I can't speak for you, but this is very close to what I'm after. Projects to keep my mind occupied, a positive influence on the audience, and a diverse portfolio of finished products I can be proud of. As I look back on I Am Battle Comic, I'm reminded of how fortunate I was to see the process. To me, at the time, it was just another overseas tour. I couldn't find a single narrative, much less an entire feature-length documentary. But that's what guys like Jordan Brady are here for, to remind us that if we're daring enough to start something, we'll likely get to the end. If you're interested in commercial directing, you can learn more from Jordan Brady at commercialdirectingfilmschool.com. There you'll find things like the Commercial Directing Boot Camp and Masterclass. And if you'd like to contribute to a cause that's close to both myself and Jordan, consider buying a bottle of Oh So Delicious hot sauce. Visit ohsodelicious.org, O-S-O, delicious.org. And every bottle sold, $1 goes to the NMFA, the National Military Family Association. This is an organization I've done work for in the past. I believe in the cause very much. The men and women stationed overseas face their own difficulties, but what comes with that are families, spouses, and children who also face difficulties that come along with having a family member that serves in the military. I encourage you to visit militaryfamily.org, see some of the work they're doing, and if you feel moved at all, consider picking up a great bottle of hot sauce and doing some good in the process. ohsodelicious.org. Eyes on the Ground is produced by me, Slade Ham. Additional production and music provided by Brian Carrion. To support future projects like this, please consider contributing to my Patreon or subscribing to me on all things social media at Slade Ham. SLADEHAM.